Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. New York City offers such a wide range of performance spaces, displaying the diverse talents of musicians, actors, dancers, and spoken word artists, that it would be impossible to keep track of all of them. Today, we're going to talk about one of them, Harlem Stage, an institution that has been presenting new works by artists of color for more than 40 years. Its theater is located in the Gatehouse, a 34-year-old landmark building at 135th Street and Convent Avenue that was once part of the Croton Aqueduct system that brought fresh water to the city. Today, we're pleased to have with us Dr. Indira Etwaroo, who this year was named Artistic Director and CEO of Harlem Stage. She'll tell us about the history of Harlem Stage, its mission, this year's programs, and describe her vision of the institution's future. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Sheryl. It's so lovely to be with you today.
You know, I have to admit that I was not familiar with Harlem Stage until it was suggested that we do this program. So why don't you tell me about its history and its mission?
Harlem Stage was founded in 1983. And when it was founded, it was thought of as an incubator for talent, particularly artists of the global majority. We know that when we think about our globe and its population, 85% of our population globally is made up of people of color. So I like to think about us as folks of color as people of the global majority. It's an empowering way to think about us within the work. And Harlem Stage is ensuring that over the last 40 years, now 41 years, that we're not only a place for civic engagement, a place to focus the issues of our time, but most importantly, that we're there to ignite, to spark this artistic freedom, to put investments into artists of color, black and brown artists from across the globe, to give them a space to think out loud and dream out loud. We believe that if we're able to ignite that artistic freedom, it leads to new works, artistic works, new ideas, and a new world in which all people can flourish.
Now, when Harlem Stage originated, the performances were on City College, correct?
That's right. It started with City College, Aaron Davis Hall, and then the amazing visionary Pat Cruz, who ran Harlem Stage for 25 years, she and her board had a vision that the Gatehouse right across the street, right adjacent to Aaron Davis Hall, could be turned into something spectacular, experimental, innovative for artists. And that's what it's become, and that's what it's been. It was 17 years ago that that space opened, and we've had everyone from Bill T. Jones, Sheryl, Vijay Iyer, Camille Brown, many of whom started when they were lesser known. So many of the artists who started Harlem Stage go on to become multi-Tony nominated artists or award-winning artists or MacArthur Fellows. We have 5 of our artists who have gone on to become MacArthur geniuses. So it is an incubator of genius, I think, and has been. It's such a beautiful space in that when you enter it, the Romanesque building belies that when you walk in, it's a very modern, flexible space where the artist, it's a blank canvas for them. Whatever they can imagine, whatever they can dream up, that space can be reconfigured to support their innovations and their ideas.
Now, you obviously feel that there is a real need for performance spaces that are dedicated to artists of color. Tell me why.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, research study after research study points to the fact that Harlem Stage remains vital and critical. We just carved out a wall, for example, where we're presenting Hollis King, and he's showing some of his photographic works. Recent research suggests that out of all the museums in America, 1.2% of the work being presented is of Black artists. We know that In the 1990s, when the Reagan administration diminished the funding for arts organizations, 87% of black theaters closed their doors. They shuttered, 87%. And there were hundreds of black theaters that came out of the black arts movement and the civil rights movement of the 1960s and 1970s. And a recent study, Sheryl, the Helicon Collaborative study in 2017 indicated that only 10% of all philanthropic dollars in the United States, so there are $3.4 billion given annually to arts organizations, 10% of that is divided up by black and brown communities. That's the Latino, indigenous, Asian, and black communities, that we're sharing 10%. The other 90% is going to predominantly European and Western focused institutions. So, you know, data suggests to us, those who have been doing this for some time, we could tell you that we knew this all along, but the investments have not been there. But the cultural richness is there, the vibrancy is there, the ability to create in such disinvested spaces is absolutely stunning. And so Harlem Stage remains critical for our artists.
Well, I certainly know that, you know, having grown up in the black community in Birmingham, Alabama, and knowing those of us who are running around taking piano lessons and flute lessons and singing, that there is a huge amount of probably untapped talent among the black community and black and brown community all around the United States. Tell me about this year's season of Harlem Stage.
This year's season is really about looking at Harlem Stage with fresh eyes. It is the most beautiful space, in my humble opinion, in all of New York City. It's so unique. And watching the artists transform it is so unique. Most theaters when you enter, you sit down and you watch the performance. Sometimes our artists will have us you know, standing and joining in, like Sunny Jane as part of our Uptown Nights Festival, which we just finished. And that was about, you know, really thinking of ourselves as people who could be a part of the creative expression. We had Divinity Rocks and Art and Arturo. They were part of our When We Are Heard launch for this season.
Tell me about that. That is sort of the theme for the season, right?
Yeah, When We Are Heard piggybacks on the book by Denise Young. Denise Young was one of the first black women in a C-suite in Silicon Valley, also an artist.
You're gonna have to tell me what a C-suite is.
It is chief executive officers or chief financial or chief, so a C-suite in a corporate environment. It's the top level of executives, and she was the very first black woman or woman of color in a C-suite in Silicon Valley, and she wrote a book, When We Are Seen. The book really challenges America and the globe to say we have to slow down and see each other. And so for artists, it's really about, you know, when we are heard. So when we are heard is what happens when people exercise that right and they're heard, but also we're looking at artists. When artists step forward and when artists speak truth to power and they talk about everything from immigration to equity to the environment. For example, in our eMoves Festival, which is happening later in the season, Bebe Miller, an extraordinary black choreographer, is looking at forest as part of this larger ecosystem of the environment, but also how we as humanities connect to our environment and to the planet. We'll also have, as part of that eMoves Festival, a Japanese choreographer, Eiko Otake, who's absolutely brilliant and bringing a new way of us thinking about movement and spatial awareness in the space. And the centerpiece of this season, Sheryl, that will resonate with you, given your roots, it resonates with me, given my roots in the South, is Freedom Riders. We're going to be taking the story of 12 angry men and women, which is stories of racial profiling, everyday Americans who have experienced racial profiling, and actors will be sharing those stories. We're going to start the readings of those stories in Montgomery, Alabama. We'll then bring that reading to Atlanta, Georgia, then to Durham, North Carolina, then to Washington, D.C., and it ends in Harlem, Sheryl, on May 25th, 2025, which is the unfortunate 5-year anniversary commemorating the murder of George Floyd. And that is the Great Migration Route. James Weldon Johnson in 1925 said, if you're looking for a place where Black people can thrive, go to Harlem. Well, we know that's still the case. Harlem is a place where Black organizations have been thriving, everyone from the Apollo to the National Black Theater to Dance Theater of Harlem, Harlem School of the Arts Classical Theater of Harlem, the Jazzmobile. These organizations have shown extraordinary resiliency within long-standing disinvestments. So it is a place, and Harlem Stage, of course, is very much a part of that rich history. It is a place for artists of color, artists of the global majority, Black and brown artists, to come and have a space to just dream out loud.
And it sounds like it's a place that uses art in the broad sense to speak to social issues, environmental issues, political issues, justice issues. That seems to be infused in the artwork that you support in the
absolutely.
Artwork.
You're so right about that. We have always been at the intersection of arts and social justice. And with a 41-year history of that, we are very heartened that organizations across New York City and across the world since the murder of George Floyd have begun to question their own work. And have they been, in fact, lifting up voices that have needed to be heard, voices that have historically been invisibilized, voices that have historically not been heard, looking at the entire ecosystem. And I would challenge all of us within the arts and culture ecosystem to really look at our boards, to look at our leadership, to look at our audiences, to look at our curation and the artists that we're presenting, and to ensure that we're representing the exquisite diversity of the world.
And I think it's true, you are beginning to hear the voices of that global majority heard in opera,
Yes.
And in, you know, other art forms in the city that perhaps you didn't see it before.
That's right.
You have something called the Waterworks Commissioning Program. Tell me about that.
The Waterworks Commissioning Program is an opportunity to put investments into artists. We go to them, they have ideas, they have, you know, concepts that they're shaping. Musicians, composers, dancers, choreographers. We'll be doing more with theater artists and playwrights and directors, and of course performance art. And we'll make investments in artists, we'll provide mentorship, we'll provide space, and they get to create art within Harlem Stage and just create something that never existed before, bring it to our Harlem community and our New York community, and then travel with it across the world. It's really important to note that in the past, most of our work has been at 135th Street and Convent Avenue. Going forward, our new North Star is that Harlem is our home, the world is our stage. So we'll be building works within the Harlem space, but we'll then be taking that work to our communities across the world.
So where does the funding come for doing all of this?
Yeah, so we have historically relied heavily upon our philanthropic partners, and we have people like the Ford Foundation with Darren Walker and Elizabeth Alexander at the Mellon Foundation, who have focused with such a keen eye on the inequities that have been historic in the field and trying to right some of those historic wrongs. Doris Duke, just some of these larger organizations and some of the mid-size philanthropic organizations, they have stood with us. But we're also, you know, really grateful to our city. Our Commissioner, Lori Cumbo, has invested in a CapEx project, not a sexy project, but our HVAC system, you know, to just make sure that our infrastructure is staying cutting edge. And those kinds of investments from the city, the state, and the national government are critical as well. We have individual and major donors. We'll have corporate sponsors. So within the Harlem Stage ecosystem, our financial business model, it's always ensuring that we're thinking about a multi-pronged, rigorous business model that has multiple revenue streams.
Okay. Now tell me about your background, how you got into this business.
Yeah. You know, I'm an artist at heart. I am an artist at heart, and I was born in Southeast Washington, D.C., Sheryl, and then moved to Virginia, so I'm a Southerner. I'm a person of the South, but I've been in New York most of my life and have lived all over the world. But I started as a flautist and did my undergrad degree in classical music, and I loved the discipline of it. And at the same time, I was studying pointe. So I was studying classical ballet and classical music at the same time. And those two things, to me, lived so beautifully and vibrantly together because so much of the music in the ballet world is from the classical world. And so, you know, went through those things and then stumbled upon the pioneer who's from Harlem but lived in Richmond, Virginia, Ernie McClintock, who launched the Jazz Actors Theater, 127th Repertory Theater, and had the first training program for Black artists in the 1960s in Harlem. And Ernie was in Richmond, Virginia, and I started studying directing with him and acting with him and did the National Black Theater Festival. So at that time, in my early 20s, I thought I was going to be an artist. I was going to be a dancer and an actor and director and choreographer. And I stumbled upon works, books, Sonia Sanchez's work, Toni Morrison's work, Gloria Naylor's work, Bell Hooks. And I'm reading these women, and they are challenging systems, and they're challenging the very Eurocentrism that I'd very much been a part of. And it just, you know, blew open my sense of self. I started to see myself in a very real and authentic way. And I decided to go into graduate school. I did my master's and my doctorate. And I will share that finishing my doctorate as a Fulbright scholar, I had the privilege of living in Ethiopia and working with urban refugee women who had fled Mogadishu in 1991. That civil war meant that they had to leave their place that was home with only their children on their backs and move into a new environment. And what was astonishing to me is that they left everything material, but they brought culture with them. Their songs, their dances, their way of living and showing up in the world, their entire history was carried with them through those performance traditions.
They were also fleeing the tradition of female genital cutting.
Yeah.
And you did some work with that. Tell me how you melded those two.
Yeah, so we know that in Africa, dance and music, they're a part of almost every rite of passage, every ritual, every tradition. I was fascinated that Western eyes were looking at the practice of female genital cutting from a very Eurocentric lens without hearing the voices of the women. And so for me, it wasn't to go there and to, you know, inundate the thinking with my own Western thinking, because I was born and raised in the United States, and to oppress their work and their lives and their thinking with my own thinking, but to open up the space and to give them voice and to talk about the different rites of passage of womanhood in those spaces, to talk about how performance rituals are a part of that, and female genital cutting is very much a part of that.
Were there any works, I don't know, spoken word events, plays that came out of performance pieces that came out of that?
So I wrote a dissertation, a 265-page dissertation that really did a deep dive into the lives of these women, honoring their voice and putting their voice at the center. But I also created an evening-length choreographic work that imbued some of the dances that I had learned there that the women taught me with some of the contemporary movement that I knew in my body, and created an evening length work to really sort of make sense of, for me, of what I had learned. And interestingly, I went there as a mother. I brought my 5-month-old baby with me, a daughter. And so being there as a new mother with women who were surviving so many things and living in, I'm putting quotes around this, a third world environment of such extraordinary poverty. But in that, there was such cultural richness. And it was such a beautiful place for me to be able to raise my daughter in the first year and a half of her life.
You have described yourself as a champion of, quote, art on the margins. What do you mean by that?
I think of marginal spaces in many ways as precious spaces. One of the things I really like to do is when I go into spaces and I'm working with communities, whether that's women, whether that's folks of color, whether that's folks in the LGBTQ plus community, whether that's people in the accessibility community, whether that's people from lower socioeconomic spaces, and we see them from these more, mainstream centralized places as marginalized. But the way we, as folks of color and people who have lived on the margins, we are actually in the center of our own experiences and our own lives. So it's really about centering our experiences. Living on the margins for me is about centering our experiences and not...
And making them less marginal.
And making them less marginal, yes, Sheryl, making them less marginal. And also saying we're not going to view ourselves through the lens of the predominant culture, of the quote unquote historically majority culture, when in fact we are 85% of the global population. To call ourselves a minority, to create a monolith of ourselves, does a disservice to the extraordinary richness of our cultures across the globe. And within those cultures, there is dance, and there is storytelling, and there is oral history, and there is music, and there is theater. The etymology of the word theater is to see. And so I believe fundamentally our jobs as theater is to see what is happening in the world, to focus that lens, and to reflect back to audiences what our artists are seeing and saying.
You have been at this kind of work for a long time.
Yes.
And done it in a lot of places. What professional accomplishments would you say you're most proud of?
I am most proud of the young women of color, younger than me, who are now doing this work. They are having thoughts I wouldn't have thought to think. They are in some ways much bolder and braver than I remember being at their age. And they are challenging the world in ways that I find so deeply inspiring. And so I think that's what I feel most proud of. I think this work is going to have to continue for some time now in order for us to achieve true equity. And so to see another generation lifting up the mantle that I feel was passed to me in many ways by the Sonia Sanchez's and the Toni Morrisons. And I've had the privilege of sitting with Sonia and Toni and other women, my own beautiful mother who was a pianist, who, always encouraged me to get out there, who never raised me to be a minority, who never raised me to be less than. And I work with other Black women who are raised with similar ways of thinking of themselves in the world.
And speaking of the younger generation, I gather that your daughter is an aspiring performer as well?
She's an aspiring everything.
Everything.
She likes performance and writing and directing and producing. And I keep saying, do it all. You may not be able to do it all at the same time. But if those instincts are there, hone those instincts and do it all. But yeah.
We've got about a minute and a half left. Could you tell me of a few of the things that are on your bucket list for Harlem Stage?
For sure. Sheryl, first let me just say thank you so much. It is such a privilege to sit here with you and have this conversation. To be able to sit across from someone of your heart is heartening for me. And I'm excited to take this incredible work that's been happening at Harlem Stage for the last 41 years and introducing it to a larger audience, bringing it to a national audience and to a global audience. So that is the big box to check off on the bucket list.
Okay. Well, as I said, this is my introduction to Harlem Stage. And I am certainly going to be following what you do going forward. And I'm sure that many of our viewers, having heard your mission and your accomplishments, is going to be doing the same thing.
Thank you so much.
I'm afraid we're out of time. I'd like to thank Dr. Indira Etwaroo, CEO and Artistic Director of Harlem Stage, for joining me today. To learn about our upcoming shows, you can follow us on Instagram at @121 CUNY TV. Plus, you can now watch on the go by downloading the CUNY TV app. For the City University of New York and 121, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.